boys really don't mature. They're about a year, 18 months behind girls, both in brain development and in just overall maturity.
Girls rule and boys drool.
Not one other kid in this neighborhood does chores.
You're gonna get in trouble, Murtaugh.
Hey, Ma! Can we get some meatloaf?
He started it.
Mom!
What? Shut up!
What is the matter with you?
I know it's a school night, so we're just gonna get right down to it.
Good morning, this is Harry H. Harrison Jr. with another episode of Fearless Parenting. And once again, we have as our guest, Christine Gancarz, retired college professor, retired high school teacher, and she is still alive after those two experiences. And today, we're going to talk about private school versus public school. And because this is a parenting broadcast, we're not going to sugarcoat some facts. I mean, it's like, I would love to say, well, yeah, you can send your kids to public school and they'll be fine. And I don't believe that for a second. So,
wow, right off the bat.
Right off the bat. And I know that young parents right now are wrestling with, what do we do about school? What do we do private school or do we do public school?
And you really have to start thinking about it when your baby is born.
Yeah, in vitro. I mean, it's like,
yep.
Even the first kick.
I mean, if you want to go to private school, there's waiting lists you've got to get on.
Absolutely.
That's true for daycares and preschools.
Yeah.
I mean, my sister, she told the preschool she had chosen, or the daycare / preschool, before she told the family, when she was pregnant with number one.
There's just hoops you got to jump through, and we're going through that right now with my son's children, and they're it's like there's just a lot of hoops, and there's a lot of time frames, and like you're right, if just because your baby hasn't been born yet doesn't mean it's too early to start putting your name on waiting list and learning the ropes and learning what kids somehow still test in. I don't know how you test a 4-year-old into a kindergarten or preschool program, but they sometimes do. So parents are kind of like nervous about, well, what does that mean? I mean, are they going to do
You're doing flashcards
quadratic
with your
equations?
2-year-old at home.
They need to speak in 3 languages. What does this mean?
Yeah.
So it's and then the financial cost can be. I mean, that's a significant. Most private schools now,
Well, and I think that's very limiting to a lot of parents too.
Right.
I mean, that's where most of the decision gets made, is can we even afford it?
What gets made there, or the mother's going to work, or we're going to live in a smaller house, or we're going to move to in this area, Frisco, or a school district that has very high marks.
Right.
And those are the choices a parent has. Right now, living in the DISD, it's not the optimum if you can't afford a private school.
For parents who are not part of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, that is the Dallas Independent School District. And it's a very interesting, has a dichotomous reputation, because it does have really, really good programs, which I will vouch for throughout this podcast, because I went to those programs and my daughter is in those programs now. But as a whole and on the average, there are a lot of holes. There's a lot of lacking.
But regardless of what part of the country you're in, every school district has its ups and downs.
True.
And from personal experience, I've gone to both public and private school within the same district. So, I've seen kind of both sides of it, and throughout my life as well. Yeah.
The attraction for a private school is obviously college. I mean, you put your kid in a kindergarten and pay $25,000 a year, because in 12, 13, 14 years they'll be college ready. And that's the whole reason for private school is college prep. I would think. And a parent has to ask themselves, okay, so let's say I can't move out of the DISD. I've got to get my child into the best program available in DISD, and that's going to require studying.
Yes.
Is it important to start super early, or can you bypass those rigorous, kindergarten programs and maybe start thinking about it more when the child is in 4th or 5th grade?
Nope.
Or do you have to start early?
I want to ask her. How important is it to start early in a child's education career? I mean, do they have to catch up if they don't learn anything? If they're not at the learning curve? And
you're talking 4th grade?
4-year-old, 5-year-old.
4 or 5 year?
Yeah.
No, I think that if you have really involved parents, read to your children, play games with them. I think that can be as good a preparation as the kindergarten and
Okay.
now what it doesn't offer is how to get along with other children.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if they're not in there, they're not learning social skills,
Right.
so to speak.
That's even one of the values I see, even putting Will in daycare right now. You know, we had the option of doing like an at-home where he's with one other baby, or doing daycare where he's with other kids. And as much as I don't love daycare just because he's sick all the time, because
Right.
there's lots of germs in the other kids, he is very social with other babies. I've noticed over the holidays when we had him around other babies, he was just interacting and talking to the other babies, whereas some of the other babies who are just at home with their mothers were kind of more quiet.
Sure.
and not as interactive.
I think the thing that parents have to be aware of is you cannot have a baby between 0 and 3 years old, let's say, and do nothing with them. You can't just put them with a nanny and go off to work.
Mm-hmm.
That brain is a sponge. I mean, they need to be in daycare. They need to be in preschool. They need to be learning. And if you're not going to do it, then who's going to do it? If you're not going to read to them because you're gone, understand that you got to work, and you're busy at night. What's that little brain doing for 14 hours a day? And that's a big concern,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of kids do not get any preschool or pre-K education, and that's just a waste of brain.
It is. There's a dramatic development that you can see. You know, I'm not too far away from it with my daughter being 8. Dramatic developments when she was that age. Just like you said, their brains are a sponge. And I think that's why we were so careful when we decided to put her in a specific pre-K. We chose a more privatized pre-K over here by Medical City, Dallas. And so the population was filled with working professionals, doctors' children, nurses' children, x-ray techs' kids, lawyers' kids, people who were kind of had the same goals for their
Right.
children that we had. And so they started the development and the agenda and the syllabi very early. And so 3 years old, she's already got sort of a arc of discovery that she's expected to go along.
How long did you know that program existed, or did you and your husband spend time looking at different programs?
We stumbled into that one, honestly, because we had moved back to Dallas after we divorced when she was 2. So we sort of followed the family around where the family put the similar age kids. But when it came to choosing kindergarten and choosing a school, 3 years old, we started researching.
So this might sound kind of ridiculous because my son's only 8 months, but when I was pregnant, I went and toured a couple daycares and Montessoris.
Doesn't sound ridiculous.
And I'm very much now when Will turns 1 year old, we're going to put him into Montessori, but I wanted to wait to put him in until he's 1 because when we looked at all the programs, basically the infant programs across the board are kind of all the same because they're an infant. You're just following their schedule day to day. But once they turn 1, you could really start to see the difference between structured programming versus daycare, where it's just kind of a mix of playtime and some activities
Right.
sporadically throughout, or just at home where they're just with moms and dads and parents and not really doing any sort of structured programming. And the Montessori I really like because they teach life skills, and I think that's something that public school is missing. I went to Montessori when I was young, and I just am a really big fan of the programming because it's those life skills that you don't learn in school but that you need to know to survive. It's the stuff that
Right.
they should be teaching in school, in my opinion. And so that's why I'm a big advocate for Montessori. But when we went and toured the Montessori here, they were telling us, you can actually do Montessori programming for, up until 3rd grade or whatever, and rather than going to public school. But a lot of times the kids who do Montessori programming when they're young and then transfer to like public school when it's time to go to kindergarten or whatever, they end up testing out. And so they either test out to 1st grade or 2nd grade. And so then you're kind of faced with that decision. Well, that's great, but then you're almost, is that something that you want to consider? Because you could kind of be putting your child at a disadvantage in some ways if they're suddenly leaping ahead grades and playing with the older kids now and
Not the smallest
dealing
kid in
with
class.
sports.
Right.
Yeah, now they're the smallest person on the field, and so those are things that you have to take into consideration.
You do, and you have to think long term about it. And
Yeah.
you can't just wait until your child is 3 or 4 and go, I wonder what I'm going to do about a school.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that should be on every parent's brain. The moment that egg hits the hits the sperm, you got to be thinking about school. And if you wait, you're going to be behind the 8 ball.
Yeah. And it's true. I mean, me and my husband, we talk about our 5-year or 10-year plan. We're currently talking about, okay, with where we live right now, if we go to public school, we're in a good area for elementary school. But when it comes to junior high, we wouldn't want him to go to the public school junior high that we're in the district of. So then we would either have to go private or we would have to move. So we're talking about, okay, well, how long are we actually going to be in this house?
Or transfer. See, you missed something there. This is where parents can help each other. Transfer. I'm a huge fan of transferring.
I transferred. When I was a child, my mom had me transfer. Yeah. So
it's Christine, did you notice any, when you were teaching kids in at the university level, did you notice any difference between the public school kids and the private school kids?
Yes.
Can you elaborate a little bit?
Well, I know. I mean, I am familiar with a lot of the prep schools up in the East, and because and certainly in Dallas, but they are just usually way advanced compared to the public school.
Right. Yeah. It seemed to me the boys were more mature.
Well, yeah, and the boys really don't mature. They're about a year, 18 months behind girls, both in brain development and in just overall maturity.
Girls rule and boys drool.
No, that's not true.
Yeah, you could always tell freshman boys when they hit campus, but you couldn't always tell freshman girls.
The girls look like they're seniors.
Yeah.
So there is an advantage to private schooling. I mean, in terms of when you get to the university, you're probably more prepared than the public school kids.
It depends on the private school, but yes, yeah. I would say.
And it depends on. I know a friend of mine. Actually, our maid, her son went through the magnet school program of DISD.
Yep, right here. I'm here. Yeah. Magnet school. That's the college preparatory school.
I'm sorry. I was talking. I was interrupted by this Sue-loving. Anyway, he went through the magnet school program at DISD, and he's now in dental school.
Yeah.
So it's not like the whole DISD is failing, but you got to get in the right programs, and you got to plan it out as a parent.
And conversely, I was going to say, well, I went to a private school, a very lofty private school for graduate school on the East Coast. And so I had to teach and was responsible for the undergraduates. And some of those kids did not deserve to be there. They were not smart enough, and we were literally told just to pass them because mommy and daddy could write a $40,000 check every year.
You've never seen that.
I do want to say something that you had mentioned, or all of you have mentioned. Even if your child goes to a less than lofty public school, DISD, that doesn't mean the students can't be as good as somebody in a private school.
Oh, that's true. Mm-hmm.
I mean, you take away every school. Even, I mean, students are asking me, should I go to this high name college or this lesser name one? And the answer is wherever you fit in, because you are going to get the education that you want to get.
Well, I think you make a good point there about fitting in, because when I was young, I went to a private school in 2nd and 3rd grade. And I was doing really well in the school, getting good grades. And one of the advantages of the private school is that they offer electives similar to what you would get in a college or high school. So, I was taking Spanish as a second language and things like that you aren't offered in public school setting. But I had to, the private school was not near our home. And so most of the kids that I went to school with didn't live anywhere near me. And so my friend group at school was, once I left school, they weren't around at home. And at that point, you can't drive or anything. You can't go see your friends unless your parents are carting you around. And so I felt very isolated. And I told my parents, I want to have friends that I can play with. And so there was that divide. And I ended up going back to public school for 4th and 5th grade. But because I had been in private school in 2nd and 3rd grade, now I was kind of testing out in certain areas of public school. So then I ended up in one of these gifted programs where, for math and science classes, I would go to the high school and take math and science classes there, and then go back to public school for, language and other classes. So the benefit was I got to be near my friends, but then I had to give up that private school experience as well. So it's very much a balancing act.
Well, when you say that you need to be around friends, yes, and that's one reason for public schools is you're around your neighborhood, and you can just walk over to the guy that sits next door, that sits in the next desk to you, instead of being driven over there. In private school, you probably have to be driven over to your friends' houses.
Yeah. And if your family doesn't have a chauffeur,
right, it's going to be mom, but she's
Yep.
driving to soccer practice anyway. But the thing is that what we want to impress on parents is that educating your kids is a primary focus that you have to deal with. You cannot just lay it off on the school system. Well, I live in school's down the street. I don't need to check it out. It's just down there, and I'll send my kid there. Then he'll go to the middle school, and then he'll go to high school, and then bam, he'll be an adult.
But that's another point, is that learning doesn't just happen at school. We're talking about if you're a great student, you can still excel in a public school because learning can happen at home. And so it really falls back on the responsibility of the parents. If you know you have an advanced student who's doing well and public school is their only option, what are you doing at home to advance them even further? What kind of learning opportunities can you take when they're coming home from school?
Well, even before that, I mean, you have a young child, you're reading to your child, and that's so, that's just, she knows, it's so critical that parents read to their kids, and so many don't. It's critical to spend, how many hours, like an hour a day you would spend reading to your daughter?
Especially when she was learning how to read in the critical year of, because she's the youngest student in the class. She just barely turned that age. So kindergarten was really critical. First grade was really critical. We struggled. She would get frustrated and we'd have fights, and it was at least an hour a day, at least when she was that young. Now she reads by herself. She goes off with a book. But
as a mother, you would sit there and you read.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what parents have to do. And so many parents give them the cell phone or give them the iPad, and they're not reading, and reading is everything.
Well, what struck me too recently is I do read a lot on my cell phone. Like I read the New York Times, the Dallas Morning News, et cetera, et cetera. I realized one day she doesn't know that's what I'm doing. She may think I'm on an app or Facebook or whatever, but in reality I'm reading. So that's why one of our New Year's resolutions, as in 2 podcasts ago, was to be more deliberate in it. Let's sit down on the couch together. You have your book, I have my book. So
as parents, what we want to leave with parents is you cannot leave education just to the school district. You got to step up, and if you're going to helicopter anything, this is where you need to be helicopter. You need to know what that school is down the street. Do you want to send your kid there? You need to go meet the principal, walk to school. What's the middle school that they'll go to then? What's the high school they'll go to then? And you need to get this in your brain that okay, this is acceptable. And there's a lot of quality grade schools in the ISD. There's a lot of quality grade schools. It's that next level where
I was going to say it's better at the grade school level, but like at Julia's school, and I've talked about it in the past, we have a very diverse culturally, racially, and socioeconomically. There are parents who don't even speak English, and there's parents like me with multiple postgraduate degrees. And the reality is the reason why our school is so good is that every single parent is dedicated to their child being there and being good. We don't have disciplinary problems because, again, up and down the ladder, doesn't matter where you fall. These parents want their kids to go to that school. They want to go to the school fair. They want to go to the science fair. They want to participate and better their children. So it's this really nice community.
Well, and that's the key. If you can't afford a private school, fine. That does not mean your child will not be educated. It just means you need to work a little bit harder at finding the programs in that school district that to educate your child and to find the programs that they're interested in. Now, there's so many magnet schools for arts and sciences, magnet schools for theater. But as a parent, you got to be on your game. And this is also, as your kid gets older, you want to turn that over to him or to her. Where are we going to go to school now? Do you really want to study theater? Do you really want to try out for the arts magnet?
Well, and I have an example because I went through DISD's magnet schools. I'm the 4th child. We all went to the magnet schools here in Dallas, junior and senior high school. I have a parent, one of my Girl Scouts volleyball mothers, who wants to have her daughter to apply to some of these schools, but she has no clue how to do it. So I went ahead and messaged my alma mater, one of my old teachers, when's the deadline? He told me the deadline. We pulled the application and I walked her through it. And she and her daughter have been going step by step through it and taking ownership of it. But again, she didn't know what she was doing, so she talked to somebody. She
Right.
said, help me.
Well, and you bring up an interesting point, kind of taking an active role and talking to your child about what their interests are. When I was in high school, there was an opportunity for me to, over the kind of J term or over the summer semesters, to take some college courses at an actual college to kind of test out what kind of major I might be interested in. And so I did that for 2 years. In sophomore and junior year, I took college classes, and one of them was radio broadcasting, and I really loved it. And that's why I decided to go and major in that in college. It was because I took that college course over the summer. It was kind of like a summer camp college experience. But had my parents not, had that conversation with me and even asked me what my interests were, I would have just gone to college not knowing what I wanted to major in, and,
You could be a forest ranger.
probably
now.
would have got a business degree. I don't know.
A business degree.
So,
But you don't have to know
Right.
what you want to major in.
Right.
You don't.
Students ask me that all the time, and I tell them that more than half of the students coming into college will not know what they want to major in, and then the other half will change their major 5 times. I think I changed mine 4 times, and
4 times?
Yeah.
Wow.
You don't have to know, but that program
It
was
helps.
interesting in that it allowed me the unique opportunity to kind of experience what it would be like pursuing that major. And I liked it enough
Right.
to stick with it. And I graduated in 3.5 years. And so I was motivated enough to finish and go forward with it. And
yeah, see, so you got to do your exploring before you actually got to college, where
Exactly.
most students
that's
are still
fantastic.
exploring their first year.
or 2 out of college.
Yeah.
now my brother, on the other hand, took 6 years to graduate because he changed his major like 3 times and didn't know what he wanted to do.
Now, you brought up an interesting thing before we started talking on the air about you had your degrees and you go to apply for jobs, and they would say, well, you didn't study this, or you didn't, you're not qualified for this.
Yeah, actually, Matt was kind of bringing this up. I'd love him to chime in. But this is something that we talk about a lot is the college degree necessary? I think, parenting in the 80s was really kind of driven toward you need to go after that 4-year degree. And today, I think our millennial generation is kind of taking a step back and saying, well, maybe the 4-year degree isn't for everyone, and maybe we should be presenting our children with other opportunities, such as a 2-year degree or a trade school, because there are other career opportunities out there, and you shouldn't have to have maybe not everyone is meant for the college experience. I think you had something to say about that, Christine.
Yeah, just not everybody is cut out for college. I mean, whether it's desire or that they really have other ideas on what they'd like to do with their time, they just aren't cut out for it.
I knew a kid who was, when he was 18, he graduated from Richardson High School, and he didn't want to go to college. He wanted to be a carpenter. Well, fast forward 5 years, he's a contractor. He's building expensive homes at the ripe age of 23, and he's doing great. So, yeah, we kind of push everything off on college, but I think the more important thing than college is growing up. If your child leaves home at 18 and they're grown up, you have done a great job.
Can I just jump
Sure.
in there? I want to backtrack. I don't want to leave anybody with the idea that because you don't want to go to college or you're not cut out for college that you're going to end up living on the street. What I was meaning to say there is that there are so many other opportunities, and that a child will find a career through exploring. Even if it's vocational exploring, just exploring.
So I have a couple things to say about this. One, I went to school for broadcast journalism, so I got a degree in journalism, but I focused on radio. And when I came back to Dallas, foolishly, I could have started my career somewhere else, but I came back to Dallas because I didn't think about it being a top 5 market, but I wanted to get a job here. And all of those places said, that's great, you got a degree. Where have you worked? What have you done? And it's like, well, I worked in college, I guess. I ran the college radio station. What does that get me? And it turned out it didn't get me. I was giving away T-shirts at the end of the day. And I had to work my way up just the same as everybody else. So I look back at that and think, if I had known exactly what I wanted to do coming out of high school, which I didn't really, But if I had known that, I could have started my radio career back then, and I didn't even need a college degree for that. And on the flip side of that, I know people who, for one reason or another, either didn't go to college or had to leave college for personal reasons, and they've been working, steadily. They've been doing sales. They've been doing all sorts of stuff. They're good people, but when they want to advance their career, they keep running into these roadblocks where folks won't even give them a second look because they don't have that degree by their name. They don't have that BA by their name. And I think it's right. I think we should focus less on forcing kids into the funnel of college just because. But I also think that the real world has to catch up in some ways and reward that sort of behavior. Like, okay, you didn't go to college, but what have you done otherwise?
Absolutely. Christine, you were talking about how people would look at your degrees and go, well, are you qualified to work? Or I was watching a podcast, and this guy from Google had a philosophy degree, and he was a huge Google engineer. So it's like, you don't necessarily have to study coding to go to work for Google. You got to be pretty smart.
Yeah, and I think what Matt is saying is that the business world needs to kind of play a role in catching up a little bit, because sometimes hiring managers can be very limiting, and I'm hiring for a sales position and I'm only going to hire people who have a sales or business degree, and it's like, well, maybe I have the skill set to do that job, but I don't necessarily have that particular degree. But because I don't have that degree on that piece of paper, you're not even going to look at me or offer me the interview. And I think a lot of people that have good skills and good work ethic are being looked over.
Okay, well, we have varied widely off the private school.
I was just thinking that. I was thinking, where did
Kristen,
public and private
Kristen
come
had
into
a rant,
this?
But point made.
Well, no, but I mean, it's important to note that not everything's going to go the way you want. I have two bachelor's and a master's in a degree field that I tried desperately for 10 years post-graduation. And the economy crashing right after I came out of grad school and getting married and babies and divorce had something to do with it. But the reality is I couldn't crack my way into it. And so I switched careers at 35. And honestly, it's scary. It's scary to think that I, quote unquote, wasted all that time. But I think what Christine's saying is you didn't waste your time.
No, you didn't waste your time.
You had higher level thinking. But we do need to get off this idea that everything matters where you come from. It only matters how hard you work.
True. It doesn't really matter, to her point, it doesn't really matter what college you go to. It doesn't really matter what school you go to, as long as you take it, as long as you attack it with everything you can, and you've made the most of that school. And yeah, you may come out a year behind someone that's come from a private school, St. Mark's and Ursuline, but you can catch up. You can easily catch up if you apply yourself. The big thing is that education can lead to maturity, and education can prepare you for the adult world. If you want to go to college, fine. If not, fine. There's a bunch of other opportunities, but you got to get educated, and that's where the parent starts. What do I put them in private school or public school? Doesn't matter really, but if you're going to do private school, you better start enrolling now. And if you're going to do public school, you need to learn everything you can about that school district.
I'm going to say this last thing about public-private. As a parent who made a choice, we looked at how much money it was going to cost to send our baby to college, and we said, no, we're not paying for private school because we're going to have to pay for college.
That's a driving force.
It is a driving factor. But so today's book sponsor, Harry.
Okay.
Because I love the books about college. I really do feel like I should have had some of these things before I actually went to college. 1001 Things every teen should know before they leave home. They should realize that college didn't teach them half the stuff they need to know about their job, and that is true. When we bring interns in, we kind of give them a little crash course in what reality is. And then my favorite, because I like to eat, they should know that life, unlike college, doesn't come with a meal card. Budgeting is in order.
These things are important.
I got tired of ramen, Harry. I really did.
Okay, are we about out of time here, Zachary? Okay. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Thanks, Christine, for staying with us and on this discussion. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Matt, over there. Childless, godless, brightest, Zach, over there. Appreciate his input. We will see you next week. Thanks again. Bye.
Parenting is a production of the Real News Communications Network in collaboration with Harry H. Harrison Jr. This episode was recorded and edited by Matt Stoker and myself, Zach Lewis. Production music courtesy of the Audio Jungle Music Library. To find out more about Harry and his work, or to purchase one of his books, visit www.fearlessparenting.com.
You're listening to RNCN, the digital destination for premium talk radio.